All right. So today's meetup is very special. Yogeshwar, who did such amazing meetups with us for Gita, he's in the middle of his studies, and I corresponded with him, and he told me about what he's up to, and he asked me a question, what I am up to. And I wanted to do justice. I couldn't quite get the email in the shape that would do justice to what we've been doing. He really wants to know what we've been up to. So I want to put it in form of this meetup. So this is for Yogeshwar, really. But this is about metaphors. I mean, this is something that we've been talking about off and on. And I'm very much focused on this topic. Okay. Now, metaphors is really what the language is made out of. It is something that is very, very deep. Okay, now, I don't know much about language. I don't know much about these topics that we're talking about. We're talking about the topic that we are focused on is the topic of dealing with Dao De Jing, Bhagavad Gita, and Gospel of John. So this is about very deep idea about using metaphors to deal with topics such as this. Okay. And again, my understanding of religion, as Yogeshwar, is not much. I'm not really well studied in either of these things. And I'm language. I love language. I love all of these things, but my knowledge is not really good. So this is an attempt. So please take it for what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take three metaphors: water, fruit, and words. And I'm going to talk about how Dao De Jing, Bhagavad Gita, and Gospel of John deal with these. So you can see how critical these, not these metaphors, but how critical metaphors are to actually access, to actually think about the ultimate. Okay. And then I'm going to summarize with quotes from each of the three. And finally, I'm going to, if I have time, I'm going to read a poem. So this is a presentation on power of metaphors, after which I would love to hear what you thought of the presentation itself. And then we can talk about anything that you want to talk about on metaphors. Okay, so that's the structure. So let's begin with water. When we started our meetups, Yogeshwar, on Dao De Jing, we started with Bruce Lee's quote, "Be like water, my friend." Okay, it's a beautiful, beautiful quote. And actually, Dao De Jing, Lao Tzu in Dao De Jing, does such a beautiful job of using metaphors to discuss, to describe, to point to the Tao. And it is pointed to using various metaphors. Be like water. Water is what it is. It's continuously flowing, continuously changing. So that's how Tao deals with water. Now, you talked about, Yogeshwar talked about the ocean and the drop all the time. Brahma is the ocean. You are actually a drop of that ocean. You have the same nature as Brahma, as the Tao. But you get mixed up. You think of yourself as salt and stand apart. But the moment you jump into the ocean, you become part of the ocean, and then the ocean becomes you. So that's the principle of Tattvam Asi, beautifully illustrated. This is a metaphor from Gita. Naneshwar uses it a lot. Yogeshwar used it a lot in order to show this point, because this is a fundamental principle. And then let's go to Gospel of John. In chapter 4, Jesus asked for water and then says that if you knew who was asking for water, you would ask for living water. And then in the later chapter, he says that rivers of living water will flow from your heart. And that's what happens, when, for example, Nyaneshwar describes the experience of being one with the Brahma. It is these rivers flowing, touching everything, embracing everything. So this is the metaphor of water. Let's go to the next metaphor. Second one, fruit. Now, Dao De Jing, the organic metaphor is built into Dao De Jing. It permeates the whole of the thought of the Tao. You are always going back to the nature, seeing how nature grows and being like nature. Let the Tao flow through you. That's the idea of Wu Wei, flow with the Tao. And when you flow with the Tao flows through you, and the action is effortless. Just this week, we talked about fruit in Genesis. And in chapter 15 of John, we're talking about Jesus saying, I'm the true wine. Okay. So now look at how, look at the nature of fruit, both in Genesis and John 15. The tree that is producing the fruit. Now, again, I want to point out to everybody that knowledge in the Indian tradition is knowledge of God. It is not about knowledge of chairs and how to fix chairs. It is knowledge means knowledge of God. And the same is true for the Tao and for Gospel of John. So when you're talking about knowledge of good and evil, or you're talking about knowledge of God. And knowledge of God is wisdom. And that is the word. So Jesus is the wisdom of God. Now, let's compare the story in the tree in Genesis with the tree in chapter 15. How does the tree work? The nourishment comes from the root, comes from the earth itself into the root. So it's the roots which are producing all the nourishment. And then it flows through the branches. The sap flows through the branches, which brings forth the fruit. The roots and the trunk is God, is the Tao. That is producing all the nourishment. How you do things is the branches, the structure of your life. If, as is said in chapter 15, if you throw away the branches which are not going to produce, or through which sap is not flowing, and have branches through which the sap is flowing, then you will bring forth the fruit, and that fruit will abide. If you look at the fruit from the point of effects instead of the cause, instead of loving the cause, focusing on the cause, if you look at the fruit only in effect. What does Eve say? The fruit looked good, it looked good to eat, and it promised wisdom. These are all results. And if you pluck and eat the fruit, you have taken something for which you were not the cause. You're trying to get the effects without living the cause. And then what does he say? If you, this is again Genesis, if you eat the fruit, you will surely die. What does that mean? The die here, life here, all of this is spiritual. It will stop your ability of knowing where the fruit came from and how to bring forth fruit in your life. How do you let Tao work through you? How do you do Wu Wei? If you just look at the 10,000 things and not look at how the Tao produces 10,000 things, if you do not get the way of the Tao, what you will have will actually take you away from the Tao. And it will surely kill your spirit, your consciousness, because you're saying no to the Tao, to God. So that is the act of saying, I just want the result of the fruit because it looks good, it's good to eat, and it is the result, it will make me wise. Now, just like Jesus is the true vine, he's the true fruit. Okay, we will, I will elaborate. I'll talk about something from Gita, chapter 4. There is one verse, I think it's verse 24, which is really beautiful. So, which relates to this. So I will come to that in a moment. But let me see here. Bhagavad Gita. All right. So that is the thing. Like, I will actually, let me just go ahead and get that. So what I'll do is let me just make this point about the fruit and the meaning of fruit. So again, some people were asking, is this like material versus spiritual? No, it's not material versus spiritual. It's to realize that all things are being produced through the Tao, through the nature, the laws of nature. This is saying, I want the results of the law of nature, but I will turn my back on understanding the laws of nature. I don't want to understand the law of nature, just want the effect. I want the 10,000 things, but not the Tao. Okay. Now, to see the consequence, so I'm going to jump into Gita for a moment, and then I'm going to come back to the Gospel of John and the Bible. There is an amazingly beautiful, one of my favorite verses from Gita. This is chapter 4, verse 24. Okay, let me see. The best translation of it I have found is by Sri Aurobindo. Now, this you say when you eat. Okay, not the fruit of knowledge or anything, when you eat anything. Okay, when you eat anything. This is a prayer that you say when you eat anything. So think of what you're eating. Suppose you're eating a fruit. Okay, and let's compare this prayer for eating fruit with the actions of Adam and Eve on one hand, and secondly, I also want to compare it to the idea of Eucharist. Okay, because and what Jesus is saying in chapter 15. Okay, so let me read the translation of Aurobindo first, and then I will read my own slightly modified translation, which brings these points out more explicitly here. It says, when you eat something, so now imagine this is a fruit that you're eating. It's saying that fruit, Brahma is giving you the fruit. Okay, that's point number one. Brahma is the fruit. Okay, the fruit is Brahma. Third, by Brahma it is offered. So it is, so okay, we're not doing any questions right now. So all right, so Brahman is sacrificing the fruit. It is arpan. So that is like the Brahma is doing the sacrificing of the fruit. Brahma is the fruit. The second point. Third point, Brahma is giving that to you. Fourth point, it is going into the Brahman, which is you. It is going into the, it is seen as a sacrifice. So it is going into the fire in you. And Brahma is that which is the goal of this sacrifice. The goal of eating is Brahma. And the action of eating is Brahma. Okay, so that's 6 different ways of Brahma and the fruit. Okay, so let me put it this way. First point, Brahma is the sacrificer of fruit. So nature is giving the fruit, is giving up the fruit, is losing the fruit, giving up the fruit, sacrificing the fruit. Brahman is the fruit itself. You know, Brahma is there in everything, including the fruit. By Brahma, it is being offered to you. It is being offered to you by grace of Brahma. It is being offered into the Brahma, which is the fire within you. It is being offered to Brahma. The act of eating itself is a Brahmic action. It's a divine action. And Brahma is that which is achieved by the act of eating. Okay? Now imagine, this is said every time you eat. Before you eat, you say this in the Indian tradition. Okay? So look at the approach to Brahma. So firstly, this is not something that you do once in a while. This is something that you do multiple times a day. Everything. So it is taking it. Now let's transpose it into the Bible. The fruit here is Jesus, is the Word. It is God which has sacrificed the fruit, his own son. Okay? Brahman is the fruit. The fruit is what you are eating, is Jesus. Now imagine this as Eucharist, the bread. Okay? So the bread is Jesus. God has offered this to you. This is the meaning of grace. Okay? It is being offered into the Brahman, which is you. So you are a child of God. And that it is being offered. That word is being offered to you as a child of God. the act of eating, that sacrament, is a divine action. It is a godly action. And the result of it is that you become one of God's family. You see how beautifully it captures just the act of eating. You can see the unity of spiritual and material here. It is, and it's basically the same thing. What is happening in Genesis is actually, it is like, Garden of Eden is like our childhood. And Adam acts before he's ready to act. And therefore we'll have this entire struggle. The struggle with God, which is the meaning of the word Israel, which completely describes right from the fall all the way till the cross. It is Israel, the story of the struggle with God. It is you trying to understand the nature of God, which is a struggle, which is very, very difficult. Okay, so that is the second metaphor, fruit. Now let's go to the third metaphor of words. So what are these things? Words, right? So of course, Tao is very explicit. Tao is saying, Tao which can be told is not the eternal Tao. Let's look at one of the translations here. Let me go with this one. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. Okay, so look at what Tao is saying about words. It's saying, don't expect to capture the Tao with the word, because all you are going to be left with is one of these 10,000 things. It's not the Tao. The thing is, what we're talking about is incredibly rich. It has so many multiple aspects, so deep, that no matter what you try to do with words, you're not going to be able to capture. You're going to get only one little fragment of it. And if you call that the Tao, then all you have is this one of 10,000 things. It's an aspect. The thing is part of the Tao. The thing is created by the Tao, but it is not the Tao. Words are also created by us. They are metaphors. And it's kind of like, I see it as an elephant, but I'll have a much better metaphor for it. It's like the big story of, people just getting one part of the elephant and thinking, oh, elephant is like a trunk, it is like a rope, it is like a hose, it's like, flapping, just, different parts of the elephant. But elephants has relatively small parts than the Tao. Nature is much, 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 much bigger than that. So it starts with that humility, okay, which is the foundation, and which actually carries through everything. It definitely carries through Gita. So for example, Gita. So now let's talk about words in Gita. My favorite example of that is Jnaneshwar. In chapter 11 of Gita, he says, Brahma is everything. How can you call it? You say it is called Om, but how can you call something like Brahma with a name? How is it possible to capture Brahma in a name like Om, a sound? And he says, look, it's like this. When a child Your child is born, just born, an infant. Does it have a name? No, it doesn't have a name. Yet you give it a name. You give it a name to call to it. And if you call to it full of love, with full of determination to do whatever it is that the child needs, and if you do it right, and the child can feel your love and your devotion and your commitment to the child, then the child will respond to it. It's a cycle. It's a living thing. If you separate that out and say, oh, I heard this name being called by this child, that his father was calling him or his mother was calling him by that name, and if you just repeat the name, the child would not even notice you have said its name. You really need to love the child and be willing to do anything for it, for the child to respond. And if you're doing that, that is what a word is. It has to have the entire of Tao flowing through it. And the most important part of Om is you say Om, and when you're breathing in, you listen and you react. So it is a conversation with God. It is like you're singing with God. You're listening to God and you are singing to it as best as you can. I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit when I wrap up, when I give quotes from it, this point about singing with God. Now, John begins with, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. Without him, nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and darkness has not overcome it. See what this word is. Okay, this word is Jesus. So now look at a profound idea here. Jesus is the word. It is 100% God. He's 100% God and 100% man. That's what a word is. It has to capture the eternal principles, and it has to relate to reality now, here and now. Both. It is heaven on earth. That is the conception of what a word is. That is the meaning of Om too. You say Om with your breath. It is the Spirit. It's the Holy Spirit. The idea of consciousness, of when you're, again, this is a beautiful thing which is connecting the outside and the inside. In chapter 3, I think, when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, he's saying, the wind goes wherever he goes. So it is outside. The Spirit is outside, and the Spirit is inside. And when you speak, if your words are like what is being described in John or Bananeshwar, then you're speaking a word. Otherwise, what you're doing is not a word. That is the meaning of words. So for example, in Gita, Om is the primordial sound. All sounds are come from it. Just like the tree, all words come from this. Also look at this integration of a person of Jesus with the word. So there is the spirit, there is his connection with God, connection with truth. There is the explication of it. There are the actions, and there is the love, all together being carried in the word itself. So that was the third of the metaphors. The first one, we did water, then fruit, and then word. Now, I have read out the beginning of the Tao and beginning of John. Let me complete that by talking about beginning of Naneshwari, that is Naneshwar's commentary on Gita. He describes by saying, he says, look, I'm speaking to you folks, but I'm but a child. I'm like a toddler. I can barely speak. Yet I want to speak to you. And just like though your 2-year-old cannot pronounce the words properly, when he wants to talk to you, you listen. I hope that the love that you have for me, you will excuse all the mistakes I'm making as I speak. Okay, I'm just a 2-year-old. I'm also like a firefly. You have the God within you. So you have the sun within you. And I'm trying to throw my light as a firefly to you. It's just ridiculous, okay? But I cannot but speak of these things because I love them so much. So please excuse, please fill out things that I cannot capture. Please correct everything as I'm saying it. So let me begin. And then in 2 lines, he describes the whole essence of Gita. Okay, that is what he calls not being able to speak. And that is perfectly within the Indian tradition. It's all about seeking. Almost everybody in the Indian tradition would simply say, yes, that is the right attitude towards Brahma. You can see that most clearly in Indian classical music. The greatest of singers would say at the age of 85, when they have been regarded as the final, most magnificent performance of a particular rag, he says, their general attitude is that, I've been trying to express this, and I got some things, but there is just so much more. And that is the right attitude, because it is a spiritual discipline. This music or speaking, all of it is a spiritual discipline. So he says, these are his words, Om Namoji Adya. So I worship, I bow to Om in the beginning, which is the primordial sound. Veda Pratipadnya, which is the goal of all learning, all the Vedas. That's what the goal is of all learning. Jaya Jaya Swa Samvedya Atmarupa. I glorify Atmarupa. That means my own nature of yourself, that you yourself can. Swa Samvedya means that you have to understand by yourself. And that nature of you is the nature of the universe. So in chapter 2, it is the full explanation of this, of what this means. This is unity between Brahma and Atma. And he's saying that that is what I worship. Now, I want to end with a poem, which this is a Marathi poem that I found out about. Let me see here. This is by a lady called Aruna Dhere. And it's a very recent poem. Let me see. This was done only a few years ago. Definitely in the last 20 years. And I want to also show, because I want to show this to Yogeshwar. So I want to, this he will appreciate because he knows enough about Marathi, and these are all Sanskrit words, really. So he'll be able to follow this. This is a poem trying to describe Krishna. Okay, and this is going to be the same if you're trying to describe Tao, whether you're trying to describe Jesus or Holy Spirit or God the Father. And I just find it incredibly beautiful. So it says, Azuna tararate drushti pudati te morase pisanire. So it's saying she's comparing Krishna to a peacock feather. And he's saying, even after you're gone, that feather hovers in my mind's eye, in my eyes. I cannot let go of it. It remains. When I close my eyes, I still see it. Okay, that. Now, Zirameratya rangatse garuda azunamala purate na kare. Zirameratya. So it is like, what he's saying is that if you have looked at a peacock feather, you change the angle slightly and the colors completely change. So it's saying there is this shimmering, magical experience of just shimmering colors from one to the other. So this magic, magic is not the good word. I'll come with a better word. I do not fully understand. So it is like, in a sense, she's saying Krishna. There is the feather. But what its nature is, it is so multifaceted, so multicolored, that you cannot fully grasp it. At the same time, you close your eyes and that's all you can see. So it has these two qualities. Next is Ti Murali, Ti Tudumba Yamuna. I'm deliberately reading the whole poem because you can see the role of metaphors, of trying to explore something like this. Okay, I don't know how to do it without this. I don't think anybody can. And if you look at the Gospel of John, if you look at Dao De Jing, and if you look at Gita, they are full of metaphors. They are full of metaphors that capture different things. So now let's see how she's doing it. This is a modern poem. Ti Murali, ti Tudumba Yamuna, Kadamba Fulale Kati. Now she's describing place where Krishna was supposed to have grown up, in a place called Gokul. Ti Murali. So there is this completely enchanting flute that Krishna used to play. Tudumba Yamuna. Tudumba means overflowing river. So this sense of overflowingness is there in all of these concepts, religious concepts of the Tao. Kadamba Fulale Kati. So there are these flower, there is this flowering of trees in full bloom. खराच का तो होता तिथला गोकुळचा रहिवासी. Was he actually here? So this is the same thing with Jesus. So Jesus and Krishna, it's like, was he actually here? Did such a person actually walk here? It is like, just the awesomeness of that is what she's pointing to. Kharisa hoti Radha anato rasa khara hota ka. So she's now describing his favorite gopi, favorite lady from that town, and the dance that he used to do. So did he actually do that? So she's awestruck by the fact that this actually happened on earth, that there was God on earth. Navala paricha lila tyasa bhasasato hotaka. Like ever new play that he engaged in, was that just my dream? त्या अविनाशी मूलपणाचे रहस्य पुरते न कळे. That eternal childhood. Okay, now she's saying it's the eternal childhood. I cannot figure out the secret of this eternal childhood. तोतर होता गोप सखा की तरुण प्रियकर होता. धीट किति तो लोकप्रिय किति नित्य अग्रणी होता. So he was everything. He was your best friend. He was your lover. He was bold. He was loved by everybody. He was always the leader. Madhuvachanito Murali Manohara Rupavanta Velara Samayagnato Chatura Janata Shatrunjaya Kaikala. His speech was sweet. His music was enchanting. He was beautiful. He was handsome. He knew what to do at what time. He knew the meaning of everything for everybody. And he was the destruction of his enemies. Tya nita nutana shatarupase rahasya hi purate na kare. So these 100 different manifestations, 100 different roles that he played, I can't understand the secret of this. This is again going back to the image of the peacock feather. To bandhu, to pita, pati, to paramamitra, to raja, to drashta, upadeshaka, preraka, ashraya, to sakalansa. He was a brother. He was a husband. He was a father. He was a friend. He was a king. He was a seer. He was advisor. He was he gave encouragement, inspiration to people. He was the refuge of everybody. Sarvansati sarudayatari to tara tya palikadsa. So though he loved everybody, he was all up. In a sense, he was detached from everything at the same time as being loving to everybody. Alipta savata nirmama sakshi sagalyansa sukhadukkasa. So he was unattached, attentive, and was a witness to everybody's joy and pain. Apurvatya jivana yoga se rahasya purate na kare. This is never before seen yoga of life. What life can be, how he demonstrated that. I can't understand the secret of it. Sarva manavi natyana ati sundara keletani. He transformed every human relationship into beauty. Ayushala artha dila rasa bharalya chaitanyani. He gave meaning to life with deepest consciousness of life. So he brought consciousness of life to life. Kaya manave, kaya nemake, dave talanawa. How can I give a name to such a being? Karasa hotak ka swami, was he the master of time? Was he a god? Gudhaniya tya astitva se rahasya purati nakhe. Krishna is supposed to have a bluish skin. So she's now going back and comparing him to the peacock feather, and saying that I can't understand that. So Yogeshwar, finally, I want to connect it up to another thing that we are doing. I want to connect this poem with these meetups we are doing on Buckminster Fuller. So you see this is like, see this color, the teal is the color of the peacock feather. And these are all different aspects of, a person's being. And it's all like this. This is a dodecahedron, which Bucky studies. And there is a oneness to all of this. At the same time, it's all different. If you get just a piece of it, and if you think that's all there is, you don't get the whole. You cannot hold this as a whole. This is another way of kind of, taking the metaphor and building it into a visual. Okay. So Yogeshwar, that's what we've been studying. I'm really grateful to you for getting us started on Gita. Gita has added so much richness, not only to our lives directly from having studied Gita with you, but as you saw here, it just, communing with Gita has allowed us to understand other things that we've been studying. So thank you so much. Now, folks, thank you for being patient. This is almost an hour of presentation. Was not expecting it, but I just wanted to let it go, let it just capture everything, because I'm trying to give an overview of what I'm thinking about to my friend Yogeshwar.